Welcome, dear listeners, to History with Herodotus, where we embark on a journey through the annals of time, uncovering the secrets of the past and exploring the intricacies of human civilization. Today, we find ourselves at the banks of the Hydaspes River, a site of great significance in the ancient world, where the fate of empires was decided and the course of history was forever altered. The Battle of the Hydaspes River, a clash of titans between the Macedonian forces of Alexander the Great and the Indian king Porus, is our topic for today's episode. As we delve into the earliest history of this pivotal event, let us transport ourselves to the 4th century BCE, a time of great upheaval and transformation in the ancient world. The year is 326 BCE, and Alexander's conquests have brought him to the shores of the Hydaspes River in present-day Pakistan. This majestic waterway, which the ancients called the Jhelum, flows through the fertile plains of the Punjab region, nourishing a rich tapestry of cultures and civilizations. The river's tranquil waters, lined with lush vegetation and towering trees, are home to a diverse array of wildlife, including the mighty Indian elephant. To understand the origins of this epic battle, we must first examine the historical context in which it took place. Alexander's campaigns in Asia Minor and Persia had been marked by a series of victories, each one more decisive than the last. His army, comprising seasoned Macedonian soldiers, had been tempered by years of combat and was now a finely honed instrument of war. As they marched into the Indian subcontinent, they encountered a complex web of kingdoms and city-states, each with its own distinct culture and traditions. One such kingdom was that of Porus, who ruled over the Paurava kingdom with wisdom and justice. His capital, situated on the banks of the Hydaspes River, was a thriving center of commerce and learning, attracting scholars and merchants from across the ancient world. The Pauravas were a proud people, with a rich cultural heritage and a strong tradition of military valor. As Alexander's forces approached the Hydaspes River, they encountered the army of King Porus, who had been preparing for this moment for months. His soldiers, armed with longbows, spears, and swords, were arrayed behind a formidable line of war elephants, their massive bodies and tusks presenting a daunting obstacle to the Macedonian invaders. The stage was set for an epic confrontation, one that would determine the fate of empires and leave an indelible mark on the course of human history. The armies of Alexander and Porus were about to clash in a struggle that would showcase their military prowess, strategic thinking, and courage under fire. The die has been cast, and the fate of empires hangs in the balance. Join me next, dear listeners, as we enter the heart of the battle, where heroism, strategy, and fortune will entwine to create one of the most enduring legends of the ancient world. Welcome back to History with Herodotus, where we're exploring the epic battle of the Hydaspes River, a pivotal moment in ancient history that pitted the Macedonian forces of Alexander the Great against the Indian king Porus. As we left off, the armies were poised on the brink of battle, their fates hanging precariously in the balance. As the two forces clashed, the sound of war elephants thundering across the plains, the scent of sweat and blood filling the air, and the cries of soldiers ringing out across the battlefield, it was clear that this would be a struggle for the ages. The Macedonians, with their disciplined phalanx formation and lightning-fast cavalry, faced off against the Pauravas, who wielded longbows and spears, backed by the imposing presence of their war elephants. One of the most striking aspects of this battle was the innovative tactics employed by both sides. Alexander, ever the master strategist, had his soldiers form a defensive line, using their long pikes to keep the Indian war elephants at bay. Meanwhile, Porus's soldiers launched a barrage of arrows and spears, seeking to weaken the Macedonian lines before launching a decisive charge. As the battle raged on, the outcome hung in the balance, with both sides suffering heavy losses. The Indians, however, seemed to be gaining the upper hand, their war elephants wreaking havoc on the Macedonian ranks. It was then that Alexander unleashed his most daring tactic yet, a cavalry charge led by his elite companion cavalry, which smashed into the Indian flanks and sent their lines reeling. The turning point of the battle came when Alexander's soldiers managed to outflank the Indian war elephants, using their agility and quick thinking to evade the beasts' deadly tusks. As the Indians wavered, the Macedonians launched a fierce counterattack, pushing forward with all their might. Porus himself fought valiantly, but ultimately, his forces were unable to withstand the relentless onslaught of the Macedonians. As the dust settled on the battlefield, the scale of the Macedonian victory became clear. The Indians had suffered heavy losses, and Porus was forced to surrender. Alexander, in a gesture of respect for his vanquished foe, treated Porus with dignity and kindness, even going so far as to restore him to his throne as a vassal king. This momentous battle marked a significant milestone in Alexander's conquests, as he extended his empire deep into the Indian subcontinent. The legacy of this battle would be felt for centuries to come, shaping the course of history in ways both grand and subtle. As we reflect on this epic clash, we're reminded of the words of Alexander himself, who said, "I would rather live a short life of glory than a long one of obscurity." But as with all great empires, the seeds of decline were already being sown. Join me next, dear listeners, as we explore the aftermath of the Battle of the Hydaspes River and the eventual decline of Alexander's vast and storied empire. Welcome back to History with Herodotus, where we're exploring the epic story of Alexander the Great and his vast empire. As we left off, Alexander had emerged victorious from the Battle of the Hydaspes River, having successfully incorporated the Indian subcontinent into his dominion. However, this triumph would also mark a turning point in his fortunes, as the seeds of decline were already being sown. The aftermath of the battle saw Alexander extending his empire deep into India, with Porus being reinstated as a vassal king. This move was characteristic of Alexander's policy of incorporating local rulers into his administrative structure, allowing him to maintain control over his vast territories with a relatively small army. However, this strategy also meant that Alexander had to contend with the loyalty and reliability of these vassal kings, who often harbored their own ambitions and resentments. As Alexander continued his conquests in India, he faced increasing resistance from the local population, who were weary of foreign rule and resented the imposition of Greek culture and values. The Indian subcontinent was a vast and diverse region, with numerous kingdoms, cities, and tribes, each with their own distinct traditions and customs. Alexander's attempts to impose his authority over this region would ultimately prove futile, as the Indians continued to resist his rule through guerrilla warfare and other forms of opposition. Meanwhile, back in Babylon, Alexander's empire was beginning to show signs of strain. The vast distances between the different regions of the empire made communication and governance increasingly difficult, and the lack of a clear succession plan created uncertainty and instability. Alexander's own health was also beginning to decline, due to a combination of factors including excessive drinking, wounds sustained in battle, and the rigors of constant campaigning. In 323 BCE, Alexander fell ill and died suddenly, at the age of just 32. His death sparked a power struggle among his generals, who carved up the empire into smaller kingdoms and began to fight each other for control. The once mighty empire of Alexander the Great was crumbling, as its various components began to break away and forge their own paths. One of the most significant consequences of Alexander's death was the division of his empire among his successors, including Ptolemy in Egypt, Seleucus in Mesopotamia, and Antigonus in Asia Minor, Dardal. These kingdoms would go on to shape the course of history in the ancient world, as they interacted and conflicted with each other in complex ways. As we reflect on the legacy of Alexander's empire, it's clear that his conquests had a profound impact on the development of Western civilization. The spread of Greek culture, language, and values throughout the ancient world helped to lay the foundations for the rise of Rome, and ultimately, the modern European nation-state. However, The decline of Alexander's empire also serves as a reminder of the transience of human power and the fleeting nature of imperial glory. In conclusion, the aftermath of the Battle of the Hydaspes River marked the beginning of the end of Alexander's empire, as the seeds of decline were sown in the Indian subcontinent and beyond. Join me next time on History with Herodotus, as we delve deeper into the fascinating story of the ancient world. That's all for today's History with Herodotus. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, remember that to understand the present, we must first understand the past.